Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are recording an episode that we were not planning on recording. This was, we were supposed to be doing a fun little episode, which we'll probably push to next week, which was like way too early season predictions.
Yeah.
But then the Canadian soccer landscape kind of went on fire a couple of days ago now. So we decided to dive into the conversation and go over some of the things that are going on in the Canadian soccer landscape. We're going to be basically giving you a bit of a background on the situation, and we're going to be going over some of the the claims that have been made, the facts of the matter. We're going to be giving you a bit of a timeline that will be telling you what this means, some of the big questions surrounding it and what we think is important to do at this time. And I think that'll take up most of our time here. But before we dive too much into it, there's a lot to dive into. Remember to follow us on all of our socials, like Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and Twitter at Coast to Coast FC, and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube. If you haven't tuned in, we do have a YouTube channel now, Coast to Coast FC, where we upload the visuals of the podcast. And if you have Spotify, you can also see the visuals here, because we're going to be putting up some visuals throughout the podcast from now on. And hopefully you get to enjoy what we are producing now in the new year. But yeah, let's jump right into what's been going on. I mean, it's been a bit of a crazy time, right in Canadian soccer. So for those who didn't know, which I would be surprised what rock you're living under, but the CSB and Mediapro, which is the company, the broadcasting company, the production company that gave us One Soccer, have been going through a public, messy breakup. It's been quite a torrid affair, honestly, as a fan and as a journalist, because it almost feels like, like we're all, the fans are all children of the divorce between these two companies that are just kind of pointing towards each other, putting blame.
I was going to say that it is like, I feel like we're like the only child, and you can see the two parents having this massive fight and about to be divorced, but neither one really commenting on that they want the kid.
Yeah, exactly. We're all left in this state of confusion and panic and anger, and it's social media that day. I had to take a break because it was becoming quickly a bit of a cesspool of doom and gloom over there. That's one of the reasons why we took a little time also to record this podcast, to let more information to come out and to get a bit more level heads, because if I would have had to record a podcast that day, it would be a very different tone to the one that I believe I'm giving to now. But let's start with a little bit of background. For those who don't know exactly what the relationship between CSB, which stands for Canadian Soccer Business, and Mediapro, we're going to give you a little bit of information, a little brief history of the two. So basically, CSB and Mediapro in 2018 signed a 10-year commercial agreement where CSB would give Mediapro the rights to Canadian soccer, and in return, Mediapro would produce and broadcast it. The way that this happened was Mediapro offered an $87 million deal for a 10-year deal, together with sports betting rights and digital platform rights for the CSB assets. In a couple of statements across now that are more prevalent because of what's been going on, it's come out that Mediapro said that the goal of the partnership with the CSB was to deliver top-tier soccer content to a growing Canadian fan base. The agreement called for it that Mediapro had to pay CSB an annual licensing fee ranging from $5 million in 2019 to $14 million in 2028. According to Mediapro. CSB and Mediapro agreed in this agreement to share sponsorship revenue from commercial inventory 50-50, with CSB providing annual minimum guaranteed payments for the first 3 years of the deal. So 1 million in 2019, 2 million in 2020, and 3 million in 2021. Now, that is the agreement in itself. That's what's been allowing the CPL to be a thing for the last 5
Yeah.
years. And until recently, we thought it was all fine and dandy. We thought that this was going great and
Yeah.
that, things were slowly but surely coming along, and that, there's progress pointing up in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, like you
And
say, slowly is the key point, I guess, to start with over there. There was mistakes made with the Eddies, but the whole York United process, it looked like okay, things are starting to get a little bit more organised, quite professional, and we've got a nice little bit of a future coming up for us.
yeah, yeah, and for those who read our zine, that's something that we tried to put across at the very end. That the CPL future looks bright, so tune in and join.
Yeah, they
Wish
had to
we would
wait on
have
that
gotten a
parade
little bit of
quickly,
a, yeah, exactly. Wish we would have gotten a little bit of a heads up before we
man.
put that into our zine. But anyways, for those who don't know Mediapro as well, Mediapro is a Spanish company that is backed by Chinese investors, and they had their own little drama during the time that the CPL was going in 2020. Don't want to go too much into it, but just so they know, this isn't the first time that Mediapro
No.
is in some legal trouble. They pulled out of a 3.3 billion euro broadcasting deal for Ligue 1, the French top tier league, in 2020, citing reasons of the pandemic. They tried to renegotiate the league. Did not accept the renegotiation, so Mediapro backed out, and that resulted in a serious legal battle where I think Mediapro only paid $100 million in severance, and Ligue 1 had to sort of pick up the pieces
Yeah.
afterwards. And in 2022, Mediapro refinanced its debts, handing its majority shareholder, Hong Kong-based Southwind Group, more control. The co-founder, Jaume Rudes, which was one of the guys that was the face of Mediapro during this whole debacle with Ligue 1, left the company in the past October. And there were reports around that time that Southwind, the majority shareholder, was looking to sell its 80% stake in Mediapro. So things aren't, even outside of this, things aren't looking great for Mediapro right now.
No.
But, for a lot of the time, for us, we didn't really know much of that. We were just happy with what they were producing here, which was one soccer content. And, happy, I guess it depends on your view on it. But we were content at the very least. And then it broke out that there was not the harmony that we were expecting. There was a little bit of trouble in paradise, because on Thursday, January 25th, so 2 days before the time of recording, there were reports that broke out from Joshua Cloak from The Athletic and Rick Westhead, as well as some other sources, stating that CSB were clawing back the media rights for Canadian soccer, including the CPL, the national teams, and the Canadian Championship, from Mediapro. So those reports came out, and a little while later, we actually got a statement from CSB. And in their statement, it said that basically MediaPro had failed, quote, to meet significant contractual obligations, including defaulting on the majority of its rights fees due for 2023, and failure to secure broader audiences for Canada's national teams, the Canadian Championship, and the Canadian Premier League. Our decision to pursue legal action was not one we took lightly, but we felt it was necessary to protect the tremendous investments we have made to build the game in Canada. And they added, by taking back full control of our rights, we will immediately have the opportunity to do so with new partners who have the ability to reach larger audiences. So that was CSB's statement that they put out shortly after what happened with Rick Westhead and Joshua Cloak. A little while after that, Mediapro decided to make their own statement, quite a bit longer.
I guess, like,
Then,
before you jump into that Mediapro one, like, reflecting on that, it seems like, okay, CSB is thinking our partners aren't doing what they want, aren't doing what they agreed to. And from the straight away, if you only look at that bit, it's like, okay, that makes sense. They've got a plan. Like Mediapro will probably crawl off quietly with their tail between their legs.
Yeah, exactly. And with just that, you think,
Yeah.
okay, Mediapro hasn't been paying their dues. So that probably means that, they're looking for bigger investors. And I mean, a lot of people will say that that's something they should have been doing anyways. The fact that,
Mm,
TSN, Sportsnet, CBC, a lot of these major broadcasting companies weren't picking up games and weren't even mentioning the CPL
mm.
was always going to be an issue and is always going to stunt the growth and kind of stunt the ceiling that the league has. But then we got the other side of the story, and this is where it became sort of ugly and turned into a
Yeah.
he said, she said domestic affair, in which MediaPro came out and said that, well, basically they have been investing $60 million Canadian since signing the agreement into Canadian soccer to both produce and broadcast the games. They have alleged that CSB did not fulfill their side of the commercial agreement, so they're seeking to terminate it. And this is the important part, that now the matter has been put into Ontario Superior Court. That means that we're talking about actual court battles. And, when you think about what might be going on behind the scenes with
Mm,
CSB specifically, you got to think, well, they're not going to pull this stunt and go to court if they don't have already a plan. Sort of like you said, Manuel Veth came out and said that they are already considering deals with TSN and Sportsnet. But, you know, with Media Pro's response, Mike, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, okay, well, now where is the fault in CSB? Because I
mm.
mean, we'll talk about in a little bit, but when this first released, what do you mean they didn't fulfill their sides of their commercial agreement? It seems like, everything was there for it to succeed. And still, in my eyes, it looks like Media Pro is still looking a little bit in the wrong here because I think CSB has a point in why haven't you found bigger broadcasting deals to,
Yeah.
share the league for one of the major things. Like we've seen that um Telus has the CPL, we've seen that Fubo has a CPL, but that's it. Where
Mm.
where are the other places and channels and companies that you can share the rights with to be able to broadcast to bigger and wider audiences? I don't know if that's how you felt after reading Media Pro's response.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Like straight away, that like say when you read the CSB's first statement that came out, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, Media Pros not living up to their agreement. Um, like you say, not available on a number of channels, which it needs to be. Like, and that had to be a key part of growing the game. And this is something that we're going to talk about throughout this episode, of the fact that these two companies, these two sides of this argument, both had responsibilities, um, and both are blaming the other now. The back and forth over whose responsibility it is for growing the game from a sort of a viewership level, it falls on both, and it's getting quite difficult and sort of quite muddy water over. Like for me, it's quite muddy water about who's actually in the most blame at the moment, because I mean, we'll go into this more, so I won't go too far into it. But MediaPro needed to do more to get more viewers. That's undeniable. But their claims that the CSB aren't growing the league club-wise is something that they're having to battle as well. So, like, but it's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, it's a very, very tough situation. And, as this was going on, the statements were coming out. Canada Soccer came out with a very sort of, I don't know, this statement for me, reading it out, I'll read it out. We look forward to working with our partners to ensure that Canadian soccer fans are able to follow our national teams and the Canadian Championship. Our properties, our players, and our teams are premium sports content, and we look forward to continuing to tell those stories nationally and well beyond our borders. Now, for me, like I get why they put it out, but it also feels as like whatever happens, we don't really care.
Mm.
We'll find a way to make sure that the stuff that is ours, the national team and the Canadian Championship, will continue to persist. The Canadian Premier League, it almost feels like, because they don't mention it at all, it's like
Mm.
that's not our issue. We're gonna focus on what we care about. And with the history of, we don't have time to go into all the history of CSB and Canada Soccer and all the drama that's going on there.
Mm.
It kind of is understandable that they don't even mention anything like that.
No. Yeah.
Um, it's a very, very vague, political, slightly cryptic message, which is sort of on par for Canada
Yeah.
Soccer. Um, but that was all in one day.
Mm. What a day.
Yeah, what a day. Um, and so that day pretty much I went to go play soccer, or to clear my mind, because this was stressing me out.
Yeah.
Just to see what, like, everything that was unfurling, having, like you mentioned, everyone blaming, like, one party blaming the other party, and Canada Soccer kind of not really being a bit not committal to the
Yeah.
actual situation at hand.
I think
Uh, yeah.
Gaja, like, that non-committal part, maybe they're just looking at the CSB, go, "Come on, guys, not again." Like, you gotta get your house in order. Like, we're like, from it, like, there's plenty of other things going on in this relationship, but I can only imagine Canada Soccer just looking at it going, "Oh, there's another big thing happening out of nowhere."
Yeah. And I don't know how much Canada Soccer was privy to this
Yeah,
information
nice. Yeah.
before this came out. So it could be genuinely a surprise. And that's why they came out with something like this, rather than maybe something that might have been a bit more
Mm.
edited and well thought out and
Yeah.
workshop and stuff like that.
Yeah, you'd
Um,
imagine, wouldn't you?
yeah, exactly. So we don't really know. But then yesterday, so Friday, January 26th, more info came out, because Neil Davidson released a Times Colonist article going further in depth about the actual filings for each party's claims that they're going to present before the Ontario Superior Court. And going into it a little bit, I mean, there's a lot, to be honest.
Yeah.
We will start with CSB. I have a visual here, courtesy of True North Foot. They kind of put a little Sparks note of it,
Yeah,
basically,
really good,
in a
really good.
graphic. It's really good if you want to go check out on their Twitter page. I have it up right now, on the stream that we're doing visually. But CSB basically claimed that Mediapro did not meet its requirements, including failure to deliver on a sub-licensing arrangement for linear television broadcasting that would expose its content to a greater audience via cable. Quote, during the first 5 years of the agreement, Mediapro failed to comply with a number of its obligations, including failing to pay $6 million Canadian in license fees owing for 2023, carry out required marketing of the One Soccer channel, and, this is an important part,
Mm.
enter into an appropriate sub-license agreement, says the notice of action. So that last part clearly points towards what we were saying earlier, which
Yeah.
is, why weren't you getting this onto more screens and broader audiences through different broadcasting sub-licensing agreements? So that one makes sense, and you can sort of understand where they're coming from, because the CSB's putting in a lot of money into the Canadian Premier League, and it's coming at a cost. Like I said, there's drama about where that money's coming from and where it should be going with Canada Soccer.
Mm.
So the fact that it's not being broadcast on a broader level is an understandable concern for CSB. It continues saying, quote, Mediapro's conduct and failure to abide by its duty to perform the agreement in good faith also warrants a significant punitive damage award in the circumstances. So CSB are looking for damages as well. And we know that from the CSB end, they're basically looking towards making new partners, moving past Mediapro and making new partners so they can broadcast in new ways to a wider and broader audiences. That's CSB's side. That's what we gathered from the Times
Mm.
Colonist article from Neil Davidson. Now, Mediapro, and mind you, the CSB one was, I think, 5 pages. Mediapro's filing was 32 pages.
Yeah.
So Mediapro they came to fight. They're not
Yeah.
backing down. This is not like how you mentioned, tail quietly tucked between their legs and walking away. This is they are not going down without a fight. Mediapro's claims are that CSB has not lived up to its promises, saying that halfway through the agreement, CSB had delivered just a quarter of the number of required matches, which were a guaranteed minimum of 2,042 CPL matches and a CPL and Canadian Championship matches by 2028. So they've only gone through a quarter of that. And a big reason for that is because the league had promised to expand to 10 teams by 2020
Yeah.
and 16 teams by 2024. So they've failed to deliver on half of the teams
Yeah.
by this year
That's
in the original
numbers, isn't it?
agreement, which again, news. We didn't know that. That continues by saying, quote, the league has remained stagnant at 8 teams since 2020 and shows signs of decline rather than growth. That one is a particularly venomous, I believe,
Yeah.
statement from Mediapro that's sort of it's taking a shot at the league and the shot at everything that they've created, but putting the blame on, CSB, which doesn't help. I mean, I don't. I guess they don't really care, especially since they're terminating the contract. But
Yeah,
doesn't help
exactly.
for
This
the
is
sympathy towards you from CPL fans because we whether it's actual the progress is where it should be or we're at a level that we deserve to be. We've still seen some progress, and we're still seeing a league grow and evolve. And this past year has shown how competitive and how exciting it can be. It shows the potential it can be. Saying
I
that
think
it's showing signs of decline rather than growth kind of leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. I don't know about you.
yeah, I mean, to play devil's advocate on that, I mean, it is I mean, that way of um, that way of saying it is a quick, swift kick to the groin during a boxing match. It's low, but it's true.
Well
Like,
put.
and to play devil's advocate, Vancouver FC coming in should be the ninth team. They've had issues with FC Edmonton. They've had issues with York United, which thankfully has resolved. But for people looking outside in who aren't regular viewers to the Canadian Premier League, who are flirting with the idea of watching it and flirting with the idea of getting really into it, some of these things, it's not all roses. It's not like Valor. Is the investment going to be there going forward? Like, there's still question marks around them. We hope that all these teams get the investment and have the visions for the future that York United seem to have. But Mediapro, whether we agree with it or not, myself personally, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm seeing it growing, and because we're watching each week and we're seeing the crowds come in. But if you're looking at from that point, Mediapro can probably put a decent case to say, look, this isn't growing. This is, I mean, it's stagnating at the moment. Whereas CSB will say they're trying to do it sensibly. So it's a really difficult, because you could see it from both sides from the outside looking in.
Yeah, no, and I mean from Mediapro, I can especially what they're comparing it to what was promised. That's the thing. We're viewing it just from like a singular point of view, which is just the growth as it is. But they're comparing it to what was the plan, and the plan has not been delivered. And you can say the pandemic kind of put a stopper on progress, and I'm sure that affected the league quite a bit. We might be talking about a few more teams that if it wasn't for the pandemic already in the league. But regardless of the fact that they were promised 16 teams by 2024, and we continue to only have 8 after Vancouver FC coming in after the Edmonton dissolved, we've had 8 since technically Atletico Ottawa has come in.
Yeah.
So this is going to be what the fourth year of just having 8 teams. So it's
and we've had teams in Saskatchewan, not quite. And like it's not like it's in some ways we can then say, oh yeah, well we nearly got there with this, we nearly got there with this, but at the same time it's like, yeah, but you're trying and it's failing. So
Yeah. And
what?
you know, you have Mark Noonan that's saying, you know, 2 teams by 2025 and 2 teams by 2026. Now looking back at that statement, I wonder if it was as much to the fans as it is to maybe Mediapro
Mm,
and the people around being like, we'll get expansion teams and we are going to keep growing. It's just going to
mm,
take a little bit more time. But from Mediapro's perspective, I can understand it. Like they have a point. They've invested a lot. They said in their statement too, it's like no one has invested more money into Canadian soccer than us since this agreement. They've put $60 million
mm,
dollars into it, and they've created One Soccer, a local, you know, channel made up of local Canadian people that's solely dedicated to
yeah,
creating Canadian soccer content. And you can say what you want about certain personalities and about the
mm.
biases they may have had and yada yada yada, but they were a channel that was solely about Canadian soccer, solely talking about Canadian soccer, producing content about Canadian soccer,
Mm,
promoting and helping grow Canadian soccer. And that is amazing. That is something
yeah,
that I don't think that we, as you know, Canadian soccer fans, we expected something like that so quickly, especially since historically you look at TSN and Sportsnet, soccer is at the bottom of the barrel in terms of priority, and it's especially Canadian soccer. Sure, we'll get
yeah,
World Cup stuff, and we'll get, you know, some European news, you know, for major competitions and stuff like that. But in terms of Canadian soccer, it's something that is very, very, you know, little talked about or little cared about in that sort of sphere of broadcasting. And
yeah. I
so it
mean,
was
on
nice to have
TSN,
a channel.
TSN have
Yeah,
like random sort of frisbee golf games at the same time CPL's going on and things like that. You've got to question whether they are whether they're A, interested, or B, weren't approached or were offered bad deals, so they thought against it.
yeah,
Because surely at that, like, I mean, soccer's the biggest sport in the world, like, and as much as I enjoy frisbee, like that it doesn't compare.
exactly. Yeah, I think there was some like drunk frisbee golf that was
Yeah,
happening in the backyard with three dads and was getting national coverage. And I'm like, what are we
yeah,
doing here, guys? Are you serious? Um, so you know, I can understand from a certain point of view. It's like you need to have more, and
mm,
Mediapro has been giving what it could with
yeah,
One Soccer. And we know we've talked to people that have worked at One Soccer. We know, and we're friends
yeah,
with people who worked past
yeah.
tense
We've
for
been
One
lucky to have
Soccer.
Alex on our show many times. It's like he's excellent, like at his job, fantastic, and he's always great when he's been on. A number of the other ones I know, you
Jordan
trawl through Twitter
Wilson,
and you get
Ollie
the
Platt, and some
yeah,
of yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you trawl through Twitter and you find the people who don't like certain personalities on there, and that's fair enough. No one's you're welcome to dislike a certain personality if you don't like them. But from a if you just look at it from a product point of view, like for me personally, living outside of Canada, I've lived in South America and England, and I've been able to watch every game live, and the quality has always been good. I've never had an issue with like the quality of the connection and the quality of the performance. So I mean, they did a really good job, and they deserve to go on. I like the majority of them, and it seems they've done a really good job. So hopefully they can, as this goes on and things unravel, they'll all be finding work back in the CPL again.
yeah, for sure. And with MediaPro's filing, I'll continue.
Mm,
They've said, "quote MediaPro has delivered on its bargain. CSB has materially failed to do so and provides no reasonable prospect of doing so within the agreed upon term." So I'm guessing that has to do with the matches and the
yeah,
teams, the expansion teams that were promised. And MediaPro wants damages of at least $50 million, court costs, and a declaration that it was within its rights to terminate the deal. MediaPro did admit that it only paid 25% of the 2023 fees. So they did admit to what CSB were saying.
mm,
But they said that they wrote to CSB in March of 2023 to, quote, convey its concerns with more requests for action since. Mediapro said despite repeated demands, CSB failed to provide a realistic and achievable plan on meeting its requirements, and said, quote, CSB's anticipated failure to deliver on its obligations under the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, has deprived and will deprive Mediapro of substantially the entire benefit of the agreement. CSB's conduct constitutes anticipatory repudiation of the contract, which entitles Mediapro to termination of the same. Continuing on with the contract will compound the damages suffered by Mediapro. So that's basically saying Mediapro says, if we continue, we're going to lose more money, and they haven't been upholding their side of the agreement, so we are well within our rights to end this. That is their side of the matter. So again, all of this is in the Times Colonist article by Neil Davidson. I invite you to go read it so you can see everything that has to do with the situation now that has come to light. And I mean, what this means, basically, the fact of the matter is there's going to be a pretty ugly court case and a court battle between these two companies that may or may not have significant implications on the league and Canadian soccer in general. Not even now, but maybe in the future. We have no idea how long these legal battles can go for. If there's going to be an out of court settlement. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how long these things take and what the timeline looks like. I just know that when these things happen, it's not tomorrow that they figure it out. It's going to take a couple of maybe years, but at least several months.
I guess to make it like an English Premier League version, like there's so much going on. It's like a Man City investigation rather than the quick Everton Nottingham Forest one. Like we've done so much that it's going to take you too long to really deal with this anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is basically like the timeline of across the last 2 days. Today, at the time of recording, there has been no new updates really. So unless something happens between now and the next however long we record, that is all we know up to date. So let's go over some of the facts of the matters, which is basically Mediapro no longer has the rights to Canadian soccer, which essentially means that One Soccer is dead in the water. I can't see One Soccer subsisting after this. I'm pretty sure One Soccer is dead, and that unfortunately means that all of the people who are working there and were putting their blood, sweat, and tears into producing what is the best content that they possibly can, in a matter of hours, we're out of a job. So obviously our hearts go out to them, the people that we know and that are close to, the people that we might not know. They are all people that, regardless of whether you might like the personalities or not, they adored Canadian soccer, and they dedicated, a lot of them, every waking hour towards creating that kind of content for us as fans, as journalists, podcasters, just consumers, for us to have the best product that they could produce. So obviously we feel for those, and hopefully whatever happens in the Canadian landscape in the coming weeks and months, hopefully there is space for them to continue to cover the game in whatever capacity that may be. That also means the second thing is that CSB is looking to find new broadcasters for the league with the goal of reaching wider and broader audiences. That much is clear. That much is certain because of their initial statement, everything that's come out afterwards. They're probably going to reach out to a lot of different broadcasters to try to pick up the league. Whether they find success or not, we can talk about that in a little bit, but that is for sure. There is no confirmed broadcaster as of today, so we have had no news, which means that for a lot of the things that are coming up, there is no broadcaster. That includes the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which starts in 2 weeks. The Vancouver Whitecaps game is on February 7th. I'm planning on being there. Depending on what happens, I might be the only one that is going to be able to watch that match. Though probably CONCACAF will find a way to pick it up.
Someone's going to have to record, because someone's going to have to put up a video on their phone recording the Forge.
Somebody's going to have to stream the game. Exactly. But CONCACAF Champions Cup starts in 2 weeks. From a national team point of view, the women's W Gold Cup starts in under a month. The men's qualifier against Trinidad and Tobago to go to Copa America is in March. And the league starts, that's Canadian Premier League, starts in just under 3 months on April 13th. So in the span of 3 months, there is a lot of things happening, and there's no broadcaster right now to broadcast all of that. That is not to say that there won't be. There probably, most definitely, hopefully will be, but it's about how can they put together everything in time to get everything out there at an acceptable rate.
Yeah.
That is going to be something that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But those are basically, the facts of the matter after going through all of those statements. So now let's go into, what does this mean? What does this mean for everything in Canadian soccer right now? Like I mentioned, all of these things are happening in the next few months. How are we going to be able to watch any Canadian soccer, basically, outside of the MLS teams with the Apple TV deal? Not only does CSB have to find a new broadcaster, but also needs to find a new production company to produce the games. Ben Steiner on Canadian Soccer Daily released an article highlighting this. I, again, invite you to go and watch it because it really does kind of point out that it's not just about finding a broadcasting company to pick it up to broadcast it. It's about who is actually producing the games, the people that are going in with the cameras, the actual, the commentators, the on-field reporters, the people in the studio. That was all done by Mediapro. That's where we got One Soccer, and they did that by having local Canadian talent all working together to produce these games across all of the 8 stadiums in the CPL, plus anywhere that the national teams went. So it was a big endeavor from Mediapro. It's not just broadcasting, but it was also producing these games. And even though, as Ben mentions in the article, CSB have reportedly approached Bell's TSN and Rogers Sportsnet about hosting the broadcast for their products, that does not automatically come with a production crew. And, quote, it leaves the CPL in a difficult situation without a broadcaster, without a production company, or media partner dedicated to covering the league in both broadcast and digital production. So that's what this means. It means that it's not just about where can we watch it, but it's how can we watch it? Who is putting it up? That is going to be another question in and of itself. And as Ben also mentioned in the article, TSN and Sportsnet, rarely do they produce these things. Rarely do they actually put up a company or like a setup to produce a lot of these matches. They are already expecting the league to be able to produce it. All they're willing to do is to actually broadcast it. So that's going to be an issue in and of itself. And like I said earlier, the CSB are going to be involved in a likely long legal dispute with no clue as to what might happen to the league should they lose it, because $50 million is quite a lot of money. And if CSB have to fork that over to Mediapro, plus whatever court costs this entire affair might rack up to, that might be fatal to the CPL. I don't want to be, catastrophizing things. I don't want to think about the worst case scenario, but it is something that you gotta keep in mind, is if CSB lose this, what does that mean for the league and for Canadian soccer? That's something that we have to keep in mind. But so this is basically what has been going out in the last 48 hours. And looking at all this, looking at what it means, Mike, how are you feeling? Because I remember I texted you probably right before you were going to go to bed, being like, by the way,
With
Canadian
the
soccer's
time
on
difference, this
fire.
doesn't help.
Sweet dreams. So how, with now all this in mind, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you've mentioned, we've given it a few days to think it over. Because we wouldn't have probably done as calm a response as for those who obviously Josh Healy, Wanderers Notebook, part of our magazine. He has his own podcast, and they did a really good response straight after. But I don't think I would have been able to keep my cool quite as much.
I can
So
imagine.
so we tried to sit back and look at it. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So I'm sitting there thinking, surely these issues don't just happen in like 2 days ago. This isn't the sort of thing where you're having a few drinks with a friend in the bar, and obviously all of a sudden you've had a couple too many, and then an argument breaks out. This isn't this. This is something that's building and building and building. And the fact that we're still at 8 teams, the fact that we're not growing across audiences across Canada is huge. Like this, the issue that I think maybe we're not talking about enough, and I'm curious to think what your thoughts are. Is the actual ambition for this league bigger than what it realistically can do? Because they want 16 teams by 2025. Like that was the agreement. This is what they were planning. Have they gone out and gone, yeah, it's football, soccer, people will watch it. We'll be fine. Let's make this deal. Everything's going to be easy because everyone loves soccer. And they've tried to build it, and they wanted to go too big too quickly. And maybe they still think maybe the CSB think they're bigger than they are, as it's a league that's growing. And it's difficult to compete with when you've got 3 MLS sides that have big followings already, that have a lot more money. Fans have already built up their rapport with them. We've spoken with other people, like other fans around the league, who say, like, yeah, it's great that people are starting to come, but it's not a rapid amount of work with filling stadiums. I mean, look at Fala, look at York. They're not. It's not bursting at the seams. Vancouver, it's great they've had a good start, but you look around and there are empty seats. It's not that they're having to turn people away. With this, it's a product that has to be built, and maybe there's maybe there's a sense of the fact that both CSB and Mediapro thought maybe this is going to be easier than it really is.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, where maybe when they sign this agreement, especially a 10-year agreement, like that requires so much gambling on what the future might look like. That requires so much, forethought, and so much sort of just prediction, and essentially on nothing, because you never know how things change. Sure, the 2026 World Cup will eventually mean that more people are interested in Canadian soccer, but that's what happens afterwards, in 2027, 2028. Like, it goes even beyond the World Cup initially. And to be able to say that we'll have 16 teams by 2024 and we'll be able to put these many matches, I wonder if that was just for them to get it across the line. I wonder if it was something that maybe it wasn't even CSB that put it forward. Maybe it was Mediapro that put it forward, that says, if you get this, we'll broadcast it, and we'll do it. This is what we're saying you need to do for us. But, they were the ones who put it forward. We don't know, again, the ins and outs of what happened in the initial agreement. But I do think that maybe, and this is maybe a thing of, those that don't study history will, sort of be doomed to repeat it. We've seen leagues fail before here in Canada and across the world, and a lot of people always think, well, yeah, but we can do it better. We can be different. To put it bluntly, not everyone is as smart as they think that they are at times. Even those that are in position of power and with money and with experience. Like, I'm not claiming I know more about finance and business ventures than the people in there, but I do know that, I've seen this movie before, and it's something that it was always a risk happening, and especially with a 10-year agreement. So yeah, maybe it was a case of we shot for the moon, and we're not necessarily landing amongst the stars right now, unless you consider it, hot balls of gas that are burning us, maybe. But yeah, it is a difficult situation, because when you look at everything that was promised, and you look like, yes, COVID affected
Yeah.
everyone, and
Mm.
obviously that we're not going to say that it was all CSB or Mediapro's fault
No,
that didn't
that
deliver
wasn't a time
promises.
for a startup.
Yeah, that was the worst possible time. Literally the year before, not even full year, like months before.
Exactly.
The CPL had started months before the pandemic,
Mm.
basically happened, and so terrible timing, unfortunate timing. But still, I'm surprised they didn't go back to the drawing board and renegotiate things. I'm surprised that they didn't go, but like,
Mm.
okay, this is affecting us. Let's
Yeah,
see
that's
how we figure
a good
things out,
point.
especially since that was something that Mediapro wanted to do with League 1 in 2020,
Mm.
citing for the pandemic as reasons. I'm surprised that they still felt confident enough to be like, no, this deal still seems good. We're still on track. We're still good to be able
Yeah.
to deliver on all these promises. Evidently, 4 years on from when the pandemic first broke, that did not happen because now
Mm.
we're in this situation. So it's a bit of a difficult situation for us and for all of the fans who were,
Oh, yeah.
starting to really believe in the league. We made the zine as a testament to how much the league has grown and
Mm.
how exciting it is, and as something that you should be excited for, you should tune in for, you should
Yeah,
invest your time in, and you know, for this to happen, it kind of feels like not a waste, but it feels like it falls a little bit flat, because now we don't know what may be happening. It might be, I don't want to be, again, I'm trying not to let my emotion that I had on Thursday come out. It might be a great thing. It might actually turn out to be a good thing,
exactly.
but we never know.
Mm.
And it feels like this happening now, it sort of makes sense. I feel like it's a little too late, but it's happening now, makes sense before the season starts and before everything starts.
Mm.
But so swiftly after, an incredible league season that was the fifth year, it
Yeah,
it, it feels like it puts a damper on things and all the work that a lot of people have been putting towards. But again, hopefully, maybe, this is the storm passes, and we'll see that it becomes a bigger and brighter future for the
yeah,
league and for all involved.
exactly. And we mentioned obviously the staff at One Soccer. We mentioned the fact that us fans want to be able to watch it, and we want to see it continue to grow. Last season was it was an incredible year, and we're seeing the players and the coaches do bigger and better things each season. Like, we're seeing such great ability, and we're seeing such quality, and we're seeing players go out on trial. Like, we've had James Cameron and TJ Tahid, for example, just as like obviously in Vancouver, over in the UK, over at PSV. Like, these players are getting opportunities, and people are watching this league, and Canadian Premier League players are given the platform. And until this is sorted, these players no longer have this. Now they're playing behind closed doors to the world. Like, and for them, for these, like, the work that this is their careers. Like, they want to play, and they speaking with managers across the league, from like all the way coast to coast, James Merriman, across all the way over to the other side. Um, they're saying, we know that we're a development league. We want to compete well. We want people to see our players, and we want to sell them onto bigger things, and we want to give them that platform. And they're not getting that platform now. Patrice Guys has said, like, if I finish down the bottom of the league, my players aren't going to move on. I want to make sure that we're competing, and we're competing for titles, because I'm going to give them a place to go, and people are going to shop here. They can't.
Yeah, yeah. Especially in this day and age where
Mm.
everything is supposed to be so accessible. People are so used to everything being accessible, where
Mm.
you can go on YouTube and find highlights for the Indonesian second division. I don't know, and you can go and
Yeah.
watch it, and things are like, you can't succeed in the modern world without
Mm.
having these deals that allow you to broadcast not just within the country but internationally,
Yeah.
and both for the fans and also, like you're mentioning, for the players and for the coaches, and for one of the biggest points of the league, which is to create, cultivate, grow, and eventually move on Canadian talent.
Mm.
So the whole broadcasting to the rest of the world is it
Yeah.
hinges a lot on that.
Mm.
So this definitely, yeah, it kind of affects that a little bit.
And I guess that like leads on to the question. Obviously, I messaged you before we were going. The quite big, another huge question is like York United have just been bought out. Like it's the ink isn't even dry on these contracts, and all of a sudden this has happened. So, do you feel like they had to have known? Like, because York United haven't put out huge statements. The Game Plan Sports haven't all of a sudden just kicked off as well. Because if this was going to be a big surprise to them after investing what they have, already they lost their broadcasting and production. Like if that was new to me, if I started up, if I bought something thinking that okay, this is the vision, and it was taken away straight away, I'd be livid. I'd be insane. Like straight away, you wouldn't be able to shut me up. But York United aren't coming out with big statements. The clubs around the FCP aren't coming out with big statements. So does that fill you with a bit of confidence that there must be other plans in place, because they will know what's happening. They won't. This can't be a surprise to them.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I think they were forewarned that something's happening. I don't know if maybe they. I'm sure there was assurances that we got this. There's a plan in place. I'm sure that for some of them, they still don't know what that plan is, and they're starting to sweat a little bit. But they're just trusting and holding on and not making comments or statements. But I feel like specifically with the York United owners, um, I'm sure this is something that they were informed of after the sale, because I cannot imagine, even though this is, I believe, their first venture together, I cannot imagine that it's, financially advisable to go into a league that's about and invest into a league that is about to lose its broadcasting and production part. I don't think that's something that they would have been like, no, we're fine with that. We'll still buy the club. I'm pretty sure that's something that happened after the fact, even though, like you said, the ink hasn't dried on those contracts. So, I mean, for York United, hopefully that doesn't mean that Game Plan Sports is going to pull out.
No, I can't imagine they would. That's why I like the fact that I just feel that maybe there is the maybe it's the naive glass half full kind of guy, but I am like I just feel like you look around the league, teams are signing players. You look around York United, they've invested, they're bringing players in. Like there would be an eruption around someone, or like even just a small group of players would be kicking off, like who would be like if this was so raw to them as it is to us.
Yeah, that is a good point. Hopefully that does point to the direction where it says we have a plan, because this is not something that we're just pulling out of nowhere. It's something that's been in the works quietly for a little bit. I'm sure. I don't know if maybe the reports from Rick Westhead and Joshua Cloak kind of made them rush a little bit. Maybe they weren't planning on announcing it quite then. You never know. But I'm sure, this wasn't something that just came out of nowhere for a lot of people. But speaking of questions, we asked on our social on X, on Twitter, to give us some of your questions, and we're going to discuss some of the biggest questions that have been put out during the that was how I felt, being put out during the 48 hours of hell that we suffered during all of this debacle. So from Dan Clark, he put, my big question is, what happens to the CPL? I thought one of the contingencies of its existence was the broadcast deal that essentially guaranteed money to the teams and league. Without Mediapro/One Soccer, does that now put the viability of the league in question? So looking at, we have an example of this, of a basically worst case scenario, which is Liga and what happened with Mediapro, which was this huge deal that fell through. Mediapro pulled out, and Liga had a serious problem getting money. They had to take loans out. They had to do a lot of, close deals and making sure they were very frugal and had to scrutinize everything on a club by club basis and in general, to make sure that every club could function. for the upcoming season. So it's not a hyperbole to say that failure of a deal almost cost Ligue 1 its entire league. It almost spelled the end for one of Europe's and the world's, top 5 leagues.
Yeah.
Now, and that's with Ligue 1, which is a historic league. We have that as an example for us as the CPL, because in the same vein, Dan is correct. That is a huge part. One of the contingencies is that a lot of the money that clubs get are from the broadcasting deals. It's what it's what keeps the light on, basically. Especially since we're not, as much as we've seen players being sold on recently. That's not the main income. Even match tickets necessarily isn't the main income for a lot of places. It's the TV deals. It's the broadcasting money. So for teams like Valor and for a team like maybe Vancouver FC that's just starting out and York United, this could be bad, but it doesn't necessarily have to be bad, because if the CSB do get a plan in place quickly enough that they can, once again get a broadcasting deal that can funnel money into the league in time for the beginning of the season, then everything should be all right. That's one of the things that I tweeted out. You can't expect that CSB basically pull out of their biggest deal, especially considering that CSB and the league are almost one and the same. They're not going to tank their own businesses without a plan, without something to ensure that they're not going to tank their own businesses. So there must have been offers on the table. There must be plans. There must be verbal agreements for something in the coming days. It's not them now just looking. They must have been looking for ages before all of this came out. So I'm very hopeful. This might be putting too much trust in capitalism and capitalists, but that they have plans in place and that this will all blow over. We'll have a new production company. We'll have a new broadcast company, and the league will still start on April 13th. And it'll just be with a different channel and under a different name. That is what I'm hoping. That is what I'm thinking. And this might be, again, for me, like you, thinking a little bit too much glass half full. I am thinking that's what's probably going to happen. And we're going to be able to not have to worry about, are we going to end up worse than what happened with Ligue 1, which basically means the dissolvement of the league. I'm really hoping that's not what happens. And I do genuinely think that's probably not what's happening. Even though that is, to answer Dan's question, that is probably worst case scenario, is just the end of the league.
And that's it. I mean, Ligue 1 obviously had bigger expenditures, but were so they're in a slightly different boat in that way. But obviously they had more money behind them, so which the CPL doesn't. And not trying to get looking at it and not trying to be all too tin hat conspiracy theory. We've seen clubs signing, so they're still signing players. I mean, Valor bring out another signing, and it's overshadowed. There was screaming in the boardroom. But the other side to that coin is Pacific and Forge aren't. They're not bringing anyone in, and they're letting players go. And is that a sign that they're realizing we're not going to have as much money? We're not going to receive as much. We're going to have to let our big stars go. And we're going to have to see where this season goes for us and wait till we're guaranteed more money again. Maybe they're thinking this year's going to be a slower year. Hopefully it's not to a point that it's going to severely affect their functioning. But they're just thinking, let's just be careful this year because we're maybe not guaranteed the money we were going to think we were a few weeks ago, and it might not come through for another few months or another season. So we're going to have to let Mandrakar James go and receive a fee and not buy a new defender in. We're going to have to let Manny Aparicio go and he can go to a rival if they want to pay the money, but we're not paying it.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I am curious to see, where the paper trails lead in terms of
Mm,
all of this. What happened before this came to a head. If there were cracks starting to show behind the scenes that we weren't privy to knowing, and
yeah,
now that
because
everything's kind of
we're speculating. Like this is all full speculation. Like when it comes to
yes.
this thing.
Yeah, just legally speaking, this is all
Yeah.
speculation. Where we're not claiming anything. Um, but you never really know. You never really know, like might have happened in the lead up to this, and if it started to affect teams even before this news broke out.
Mm,
If they were getting the money that they were promised and stuff like that, we don't know. We don't know. So
no.
it is interesting to say. Maybe eventually everything will come to light in the future. Hopefully it does. Hopefully, once we can look back at this and laugh rather than look back at this and cry.
Yeah. Probably before
So
we even got this podcast out live, there'll be something else.
yeah, knowing our luck, yeah, it's probably all fixed up with a nice bow by the time we finish recording. Um, but we have another question. This one is from Kingston, the CPL, an account that wants to bring a team from Kingston into the CPL, saying, with the CBC experiment not working out in 2019, realistically, who can be a broadcast partner for the league? I'm thinking each team might have its own deal with very local partners. Now, I think that's a good point. And I
Mm,
think, again, what we need to keep in mind is two things, which is production and broadcasting.
yeah.
Because I think local deals with local production companies, if they can find that, I think is a good idea. I think if you can only broadcast locally, I don't think that will actually work for the league. Especially, like, first of all, if teams only broadcast locally, that's the end of Coast to Coast FC. That's
Yeah.
because we can't watch the games and we can't cover the games. So that'll be the day that we, become dead in the water. So kind of hoping that doesn't happen. But
Yeah.
also, I don't think it's viable for the league because a lot of people want to watch other teams. A lot of
Yeah.
people, even fans that are local fans, want to watch other teams because it might have implications for playoffs and yada yada yada. But also, you got to think about the neutral fans. There's a lot of people that you want to invite in that may not have fans like yourself, exactly, who might not have affiliations because they're local to the area or whatever, but just because they're like, oh, this is a new football league. Let me tune in and see what's going on and see what's
Mm,
happening, and it brings them joy of a simpler time where before you know teams became huge corporations with multi-million dollars, and you have all of the drama that's going on the other side of the pond. And
yeah.
so I think that it's important to cater to neutral fans almost as much as it is to local fans and diehard fans, because that's how you get the league to grow. That's how you eventually turn a lot of neutral fans into casual fans, into diehard fans.
Mm,
And so I think if you only stick to local broadcasters, I don't think that's viable unless you can also get a deal with a streaming service. So it's basically all produced in house and it broadcasted to local channels. But if you want to sign up for a streaming service, you can watch all of the games, and this still maintains that ability to watch the different games and to make it cross country, and more importantly, again, to make it global so that you can watch the game and
yeah.
continue to be a part of the Coast to Coast
Yeah.
podcast.
But again, that would be just going back to what One Soccer was like. So that, like, if it goes to regional, you're still not reaching those. That's they then CBC would have just carried on with One Soccer. They want something bigger, and they want national and international coverage. So that I think realistic, like what Kingston to CPL says, and it's really important that you differentiate production and broadcasting. Broadcasting can't be regional, like,
Mm,
because if they go with that, then the CBC are also then just going, yeah, we just we we are the ones that were made bad on the contract because they could have just stayed with One Soccer.
yeah,
So
exactly.
so it's got to be. I think what you're saying about local production, I think that's probably a really good shout. I think that's something we probably will see if this move towards going into some of the bigger channels and to be able to stream it worldwide. They need to have those people there. Like at every game needs to. You can't have 8 teams and not have the ability to broadcast all of it if you want to grow this league bigger. So I think, yeah, production wise, agree with you 100%. And I think we both agree the fact that broadcasting, like if they're not going national and international, they're basically admitting wrong. And Mediapro get $50 million.
Yeah, which
And a
likely
big
not
letter
yet.
saying, "Sorry, I was wrong."
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because you look at the other major production company in Canada, which is Dome. Dome is the one that produces content for a lot of the other leagues that are across Canada, including the new PWHL, which is the new Women's Hockey League, which is being streamed on YouTube. They also do a lot of the other leagues like the NHL, like the NBA, and yada yada yada, the CFL, and they do those productions, like with the MLB and stuff like that. And it's in Toronto and it's operated out of the Rogers Center. But the question is, can they get the Dome Productions, to produce their things, because they already have so much on their plate. Mediapro was 100% dedicated to Canadian soccer. But with so much other things, can Dome Productions add a new entire league and give it the love and the care that it deserves? That actually brings me to another question that I saw frequent on social media, which is, will the new broadcasters, whoever they might be, care enough about Canadian soccer to give us a good product that can ensure the league's continued survival and growth? And I think that's genuinely still a question that I'm thinking about, because say what you will about One Soccer, it was dedicated. It was dedicated. They worked every day. They produced things on YouTube. They produced things for their TV channel on Telus, for when we were watching live the games on Fubo, the halftime shows, the post game shows, the pre game shows. Everything was dedicated towards Canadian soccer. And if you get a big broadcast company like, TSN or Sportsnet, and if you get a production company like Dome to come in and produce, will they care enough about Canadian soccer? Because historically, we've seen that they don't, in Canadian soccer. Will they care about it enough now to give us the proper product that the league deserves and the league needs to survive? Because if we're on like the 9th channel with very little effort in terms of producing content, and all they do is broadcast the games and do nothing else, then very quickly the league will not gain that much popularity, and it will probably eventually die out. And it feels like it could be that CSB are casting a wider net, but in a shallower pool, or at least the net is shallower depending on the broadcast, and they're not getting as much people despite being able to broadcast it to a lot more people across their various channels. So I think that's genuinely a concern that I share myself, where I'm hoping that they do care enough about Canadian soccer, where we can see actual action effort from the new broadcasters putting out content alike to what One Soccer was doing. And again, hopefully that's where the One Soccer people end up, is with the new broadcasters or with a production company, and working in tandem with them to create similar and better and bigger content than what we were used to. That's obviously, hopefully best case scenario, but you never know.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, whoever takes over will be well aware that our DMs are open.
Yes, we are open to hire.
But there's plenty of people who are continuing to do more and more about the CPL. It's not like it's a completely unfollowed league. And if it doesn't get the care it deserves, I mean, all of us and anyone who's listening to this podcast isn't going to be listening if they don't really care. So all of us will believe it deserves as much care as attention as any other sport and any other league. That this future new broadcaster will give as well. It's going to be interesting because it will be new, and I think we have to probably prepare ourselves for the fact, like you say, it's not going to be. It's not like MLS gets Messi in and they go full on with Apple. Like when we don't have this big marquee signing that billions of people around the world will tune in for. So I think there's got to be a little bit of sort of realistic thinking that it's not going to have that care and attention that maybe we want straight off the bat. I think it's something that we're all going to have to, as a community of CPL fans and followers and reporters, we're going to have to keep doing our bit and keep sharing if we want it to grow, and try and keep forcing anyone who's not watching it, just keep dragging them down, and if we can, watch it with them.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge point. I mean that's sort of one of the biggest things that I wanted to get to is that, if we're going to be able to make sure that the league continues, if there is a gap of content where, because the new broadcasters don't really care, or there isn't as much, careful attention by the production company to create the kind of content, that's where we sort of need to step up as a community. Because at the end of the day, whether we are content creators already, or whether we are just fans that are watching, diehard or casuals, at the end of the day, we're all a community. We're all wanting to grow Canadian soccer. We want to see it evolve. That's the whole goal that we were having with the 2026 World Cup. We want to get to the 2026 World Cup with Canadian soccer being on the rise, thriving even. And even though recent history is pointing to it might not be doing that, it's still, I think, up to us to make sure that it does. And I think that's the biggest thing. I know for us, we will be continuing to create content, whether that be, with these podcasts and other projects, maybe similar to a zine or something completely different, but still, something creative, something that can promote Canadian soccer. We're still going to be doing our part. I know a lot of other people are still going to be doing their part, but I think a huge thing that we have to do in Canadian soccer is collaborate. Collaboration is huge. Another thing that we did with Zine was a testament towards collaboration, because this country is wide and vast, but we all have the same sort of goals and aspirations in Canadian soccer, and we can only really achieve that by collaborating with each other, by helping each other out. We're a collective community. We need to rely on each other so that we can create something bigger than ourselves. And so for anybody who is listening, who is maybe thinking about making a podcast or making a YouTube, or being a TikToker or a journalist or whatever, creating any content that you have, I implore you to please do it, because we need more of it in this space. One of the reasons we've mentioned this before, one of the reasons we created Coast to Coast is because there was a gap, I guess you could say, in the market. There really wasn't many podcasts that were covering all 8 clubs in the league in general, and we decided to step in and create it. And we've thankfully had
we've come across so many more people doing the same thing, whether it's maybe not all 8 teams, but dedicating to their local team and things like that, which for someone like me who's not living in Canada, I didn't know these people, and we've met, and we've got to meet them, and then people have been incredible. Like you've got the joy of being able to meet them personally. A number of these people who have either been on our podcast or contributed to our magazine. But these are such great people getting involved, and it's been really exciting, and implore everyone to follow them and to listen to everything they're doing. But it is a great community, isn't it?
Yeah, and even if you can't create, continue to support those who are creating, help them, be bigger and better. And I'm not just, trying to plug us and trying to get us. I'm saying everybody involved, because at the end of the day, that's what is gonna need to happen if, we don't get a product that we're happy with. And even if we do, it's still a net positive. It's still, we still can create and grow it alongside whatever production company might be coming in, or whatever broadcast company can come in. Because at the end of the day, the community, is fans, journalists, media, all of it is the linchpin of the success of a league.
Mm,
And so, yeah, if you are able to contribute. If you're able to
yeah.
support, because at the end of the day, what's at stake is everything that we've built in the last 5 years and beyond. And I certainly don't want to see it all
Mm.
come to a waste. And so I'm going to be giving it my best effort up until the day where I see that it dies, which I hopefully
Yeah.
don't. um
It's like okay, like I'm sure we're gonna have another great year ahead of us. I'm sure that we'll both be able to watch, and we'll both be able to see, and we'll be able to share this with everyone. Because the CSB knows, like, you've got superstars like Alfonso Davis, you've got Steven Eustachio, like you play all these players playing abroad. You've got some of these stars playing in MLS, but the next crop of these players need places to go. Like you've got Alfonso Davis isn't going to be playing for the next 60 years. You need to be growing these players to continue to find these gems that will entertain and like excite us about the game that we love in Canada. And this league is going to be a platform for so many more of these players. They will be able to find gems who will go on to bigger and better things. So I'm sure that the CSB are taking this sensibly, as much as it seems crazy. There must be something in place.
yeah
Um, and please feel free to scream and shout at me if I'm wrong. If things go when we find more and more releases coming out down the line.
yeah but hopefully we can have a product to watch both of us come April. And yeah, hopefully we see more people get involved this season. We see
Yeah.
more people that are creating. And like, if you're making a podcast or an Instagram live or something like that, feel free, at least for me, to reach out. I'm more than happy
Yeah.
to kind of come and help out, because like I said before, we're a community. We got to support each other so we can create something bigger. And I always love to talk about soccer, evidently by why we created this podcast. But yeah, whatever happens, I'm sure Canadian soccer will continue, and hopefully the Canadian Premier League will grow and evolve into something even greater this season in its 6th year.
I think, sorry, I'm going to keep moving on. But I think we've got a little bit carried away trying to compete with MLS. And I think it's
Mm,
kind of time now to take a step back and think, actually, like finances aren't the same. Like MLS was unrealistic competitor to start with. But you look around the world and you see, I mean, I think the A League over in Australia is a great example. It has struggled at times, but it's still continuing to grow slowly but surely. It's not that it's becoming the biggest sport, because they are under. We're competing with hockey. We're competing with MLS. Like there's huge things, and in Australia they're competing with rugby. They're competing with cricket. Like men's football is quite low down in the pecking order, and they've had their ups, they're having their downs, but they're working on what they're doing. And I think that's, you can look around the world rather than just looking at maybe your closest neighbors and thinking, okay, there's bumps along the road, but there's somewhere to go.
yeah. Yeah, and you never know. Like maybe we have to go through a different route, similar to what the PWHL is doing.
Yeah.
On YouTube. I'm pretty sure the Japanese league does it as well,
Yeah.
where maybe you got to be a bit more modern, and try to find a way to, maybe you broadcast things on YouTube and you find a way on how to make revenue from that, in a way where it doesn't sacrifice the quality of the product.
Mm.
There's alternative ways to view it rather than just the traditional, find a
Yeah.
TV broadcasting company and stuff like that. Maybe that's the next step for the Canadian Premier League. But regardless,
Mhm.
whatever happens, hopefully we lessons have been learned from both sides, from all sides, and we can go into this next year stronger and with a product that we can all watch and enjoy.
Definitely.
But that is the long chat on the situation, the state of the league right now. Yeah, it was heavy duty stuff. We're gonna finish up here with a little bit of transfer news, some tap-ins here. That's happened in the wake of everything. It's kind of gone under the radar. A lot of these things, especially looking back on it now. But the first one we're going to talk about is the return of Balou Tabla to Atletico Ottawa. This was a nice little announcement. I love the PR that they did around it. I love that the club, the president basically said, if you have this many likes, I'll get Tabla back. And he did. such a simple but cute little like marketing thing there. But it's really amazing to see him back. Obviously, he had a lot of magical moments. We've talked about magical players in the last season. Like players like Ali Musi and Eamon Salouf. Balou Tabla was one of the, I guess you could say, OGs in that regard, of a player that you saw when he got the ball, he could create special things. That's why since young he's been pepped to do great things. He spent time in La Masia in Barcelona, so it's great to have another Canadian talent like that back in the league, and hopefully he can do some special things for Ottawa. But
is there just to jump on that? It's an exciting one as well, because we asked about are they going to have to be a bit more adventurous? Are they going to have to move away from this purely counter-attacking, very deep, who's going to support Ollie Bassett and Sam Salt, or are they going to be on their own? They brought in Matteo Debria and they bring in Balou Tabla. Like, I mean, these are exciting, attacking, high-energy players. It's going to be interesting to see when they start replacing central defenders to keep that defensive solidity. But this is really, really exciting. Really great to see.
Yeah, and hopefully we get to see another wonder goal like we saw the bicycle kick a couple years back. That level of spectacle from Balou Tabla. Excited to see what he cooks up at Ottawa. And maybe that gives Carlos Gonzalez and Ottawa a new lease on life on how to play the game and have a few more exciting players to support Ali Bassett and excite the fans over in their stadium. Next up, we're going to talk about Halifax. They got, it hasn't been officially confirmed yet, but again, Joshua Healy, Wanderers Notebook, got the scoop that Halifax are all but confirmed their signing of Jeremy Gagnon-Lapierre. And it was confirmed that Callum Watson had left the club to go and play in the USL. So they got one in and one out for Halifax. I think, Callum Watson was a great player, came up with some clutch goals for Halifax in this past season. He wasn't a pendant starter. He wasn't a super important player for them, but he's still a decent player. But I think losing Callum Watson, but bringing in Jeremy Gagnon-Lapierre, I think that's a win for Halifax, because we know how great of a player Gagnon-Lapierre is in the center of midfield. You look at a midfield with Lorenzo Caligari and Gagnon-Lapierre, and you think that those two, one is an elegant, regista, the other one is a workhorse, box-to-box midfielder, tenacious, and you see how those two might be able to play off each other and benefit each other. And things are looking already pretty good for Halifax, at least in the midfield picture. So I think, this it's a great little piece of business from Halifax there. They get a little bit of cash in, and they can use an asset like Jeremy Gagnon-Lapierre to their benefit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's nice to have him back in Halifax, and we're more keen to get back there with playing in that midfield with Patrice Geyser's system, excite him quite a lot. And I guess for Callum Watson, it's looking at he struggled to get regular starting minutes over Aidan Daniels and Massimo Ferrin. I mean, that's the black and white of it. And he's going somewhere, going obviously Chattanooga to try and get regular first team football and progress. I think he's had trials and possible moves to MLS haven't worked out previously. And he's going for it now, and good luck to him.
Yeah, hopefully he does really well over there in the United States. But now we'll move on to some Valor news. Valor have signed another player. I don't know if this is their 8th or 9th signing, or are we in double digits yet?
There's probably a few that have been overshadowed, forgotten about.
Yeah, honestly. But they have added defender Haris Chansopoulos, I believe is how you pronounce it.
I'll go
Pardon
with
me
that.
if I kind of if I butchered that, but I feel pretty confident about that. A big center back, plenty of experience. Obviously playing in Greece, but he played a year in the USL with Sacramento, and it's actually funny that you talk about comparing the league to MLS.
Mm.
I think a more safe bet is comparing the CPL to the USL
Yeah,
and
going for
having
that.
players go
Mm.
from CPL to USL like Daniel Crutzen, Kwame Aua. These are just Forge players that I remember, and also having USL players coming from the USL to the CPL. I think that is probably a more, I
Yeah.
guess, realistic comparison and a more realistic pathway to be able to compete with the USL. And by bringing players who have played there, means that way they can probably do quite well in the CPL and succeed in the CPL. And what we want is to see players compete both that were from the CPL in the USL and in the USL to the CPL, because that shows what kind of level that we're on. And USL
Mm.
is a really good historic league
Yeah.
in the United States. So to be on that level in such a short amount of time, I think is probably a success in and of itself with the league, and I think that's where we should sort of temper our ambitions towards.
Mm.
But yes, Harris Chansopoulos comes in for Valor. That's another center back for them. Probably maybe seeing him pair alongside Tas Mortakudis.
Yeah.
But Mike, for you, seeing all of these new names, does it feel like you're supporting basically a new team over there with
It
Valor?
does look like it, doesn't it? There's going to be the central midfielders will stay the same, but everything else is and the goalkeeper, everything else is changing, and I'm not going to even try to pretend that I've seen anything of Harris Chansopoulos. But going by the fact just going from the size that he's got him and Tas Mordakudis, two big centre backs coming in. They were needed. They had no centre backs. They had to replace that whole area of the pitch with players obviously departing. So it's interesting to see. It's like you say, a whole new team. Really, like there's a whole lot of relationships will be being built 15,000 feet above the air.
Yep, and
Up in the air,
we'll
above the ground.
yeah,
Above
exactly.
the
Going from coast to coast with all the away matches they're gonna have.
yeah.
I'm sure that'll forge some brotherhoods there in hurtling through the sky.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, the last piece of news that we have here before we sign out is Pacific have said goodbye to another player in
Mm,
Gennaro Daniels. DJ has left Victoria, and it's another outgoing for Pacific with zero incomings.
mm.
Pacific starting to look like they're suffering a little bit from the same thing that Forge are having suffering through, with losing some pretty big to decent players.
Mm.
And I mean, DJ didn't hit the heights that we were hoping, or Pacific fans were hoping,
Yeah.
from him when he was there as a striker. But he was, a great presser, a workhorse, somebody that you could always get to do the dirty work that a striker might not always be required to or expected to. He was willing to do it. So
I
with
think he had
definitely
the
an
highest
asset.
amount of back flick assists that I saw
Really?
last season. He was very good at that. Like
Oh.
he always showed signs of being this great target man with good feet, and it was like the ball comes in, he's a little flicked pass. But yeah, just didn't, like you say, didn't quite hit the heights. The goals weren't there, which was a running theme for Pacific strikers. Um, and yeah, just didn't. Yeah, it didn't reach what we're. When you looked at him physically on the pitch, and he had good feet as well. Yeah, he just didn't get what you would have hoped from him, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And now, Pacific is looking a little gutted,
Mm,
and we don't really know what's going to happen because there's rumors of, like we mentioned in the last episode, of financial difficulties. So, what is
yeah.
Pacific going to look like at the beginning of the season is going to be quite interesting. And can James Merriman still be able to rally his men to be able to compete with levels of cavalry and with levels of,
Mm,
Forge or still Forge? and Halifax are growing, and Vancouver and Valor are adding a lot of weapons to their arsenal. So there is genuinely a chance of a team being left behind that isn't used to being left behind. So hopefully either we get to see some new faces in, or James Merriman is going to have a very, very tough task ahead of him ahead of the 2024 season.
Yeah, the way it's going, I mean, those 3 teams that missed out on the playoffs, could they be back? Could they be in it next year? Like, there's so much turnaround already now, and you're looking at squads, and on paper, it's like, ooh, actually, this is getting quite exciting, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be exciting times wherever we can see it. We will be there to see it. But that is all. Thank you so much once again for listening to this week's podcast. If you are watching, hopefully you enjoyed the visuals and seeing our faces and reactions to everything that was been going on. It's been a bit of a bleak week for Canadian soccer, but hopefully, try to keep calm and carry on, and we'll see. There will hopefully be a light at the end of the tunnel. And until then,
2 half full glasses. Yeah.
So now you have one full glass, which is this podcast. But ahead of that, make sure to follow us once again on Instagram and on Twitter and all of our other social medias, so you can give us your thoughts on this week's episode. Did you agree with our takes on what's going on in the CSB versus Mediapro debacle? Did you agree with what CSB is doing? Do you agree with what Mediapro is doing, or do you have your own thoughts, or do you have a positive mindset like us, or are you rather have a little bit more of a bleak idea of what may be happening for the future of Canadian soccer? Let us all know on our social medias or on the comments of the YouTube channel, and we'll get back to you with some responses, or we might shout you out on the next show. But until next time, I'm Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm my right.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.